Hello everybody and welcome back to the Pottery Corner, my studio down on the south coast of England. I'm Sarah Ramos. Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're doing part 2 of the Luminaire tutorial. So we did part 1 on the previous video where I went into the equipment you would need and also the first part of the make. So today we're back with part 2. We're making a luminaire with the Skyline on from the Ceramica underglaze transfer, which again we will look at in a minute. It's on part 1. If you missed that part, I suggest you watch that one. And then I use this luminaire with these little votive candles. They're very, very cheap to buy. You could buy them scented if you fancied scented candles. And then the candles just sit in this little base part here, and then when you light the candles, obviously the light shines through the frontispiece, through the stars and the carving on the front. So we're going to do part 2 today. So we got to the stage where the actual pieces were put together. So this is the piece that we were working on. It's been wrapped a couple of days. I have sprayed it with my trusty spray bottle just to make sure that it is still viable, because obviously I'm going to be carving into the front surface, so I do need to make sure that it is soft enough for me to do that. So I'm just going to remove that plastic bag, and this is where we got to. Now, eagle-eyed of you will notice there are black bits on my clay body surface. That's from the wooden board that I was using. So I use big wooden boards, and actually they do mould. So that is what that is on there, but it won't be there in a minute, and indeed it won't make it through the kiln, so we're not worrying about it. So this is the piece that we were working on the last video, and today we're going to finish off the actual make itself and then carve into this front surface and attach the underglaze transfer. Okay, so this is our piece. The first thing that I'm going to do is just ensure that the join line that we can still see, not very much, but we can see it, is not going to be there at the end. So I'm just going to use my patter, and again, if you missed the first one, I do go into what equipment you are going to need to do this project, so have a look at the first video. And as I say, the template for this project is available via my Etsy shop, so do have a look at the Etsy shop if you would like to make this luminaire. You can download the template from the Etsy shop, so it's really easy, and you can make your own version in cardboard or maybe even craft foam. So I'm just going round and just making sure that I have patted this back into shape across the front, because obviously I couldn't do that whilst it was flat on the board. So that is fine, I'm happy with that. I'm going to stand it up. I want to make sure that it stands straight, so vertical here, and that it's not leaning one way or the other, which I would need to rectify when I came to doing my trimming and what have you. So I'm quite happy with that. I'm going to just run my rubber kidney over this front section just to take off the last of that join line from the front. As you can see, that black mould is quite marked on this piece, but as I say, I'm not worried about it because it won't be there when it has been through the kiln. But that is the danger of leaving wet slabs on a wooden board. So I'm sure lots of us do it, but that's why it's done it. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Now I've obviously sort of done the top, I've got a little bit of tidying up to do on the side, and I'm actually going to do that with a Surform or a Surform, however you want to pronounce it, I don't mind. I call it a Surform, but I know a lot of people call them Surforms. So I'm just going to very gently use my Surform or Surform to just run down on this section, just to take off the nibblies from there, and again from here and from here. I have actually just sprayed it, so it's probably just a little bit wetter than I would perhaps normally do it. So I'm just going to follow that line down there. Okay, and then I'm just going to again use my Surform just to go across this surface, so I'm absolutely happy with that shape on that bend, because I want it to be a flowing shape. Okay, this Surform is obviously quite aggressive, so I am being careful not to take too much off, but by the same context I do want it to do its job, so I do want it to actually just smooth this surface for me, and indeed it's taking off most of the black marks. So on this edge here I'm just trying to sweep the Surform over that corner so that it gives me a nice shape, and just take it down there. Okay, try and work in a clean space, and then obviously I'm just going to go over this front section again where I now have nibblies on the front. I was talking in the previous video about this garlic grater. Basically it's a miniature Surform, and I find it really useful. I'm going to stick my glasses on because I can't see what I'm doing. I find it really useful for finer detailing because it just doesn't take, it's not quite so harsh. Okay, if you prefer to do this with a kidney, by all means do. I'm just getting the shape that I want by taking away what I don't want on this front section here. And I use a hair brush, a long-haired brush. You can use a hakey brush you can see how much I've taken off by seeing how much is actually in the garlic grater. So you do actually probably do more when using it than you perhaps think that you do. And of course it only works in one direction. So it's not like a cheese grater where you can grate it backwards and forwards. So I am actually lifting and moving and then putting the pressure on. And then I'm going to use my rubber kidney to smooth that surface as much as I can. If it's bending your end, just hold it from the inside to stop it from moving. Right, so that's nice and smooth now all across that section. So I'm just going to quickly do the other side. So I'm just using the kidney just to make sure that that is nice and smooth all the way up. Running my finger just down that join to take the nubbies off, make it nice and smooth. Turn it round, same the other side. So I'm using my kidney as a smoother. I am being slightly careful when I'm pressing on the bend. I don't want it to crack at this stage. And there, being careful. Right, so once I've got it to there, I'm just going to give it a little brush because it's now covered with bits of shaving. Get that off. I don't want it to stick itself back on after this. Okay, a quick tidy up of the workstation is recycled back into my bit box. Nothing's wasted, that can all be recycled. I just put it in my bit box and then I just give it a spray and that reconstitutes back. I can re-wedge this when I want to, if I want to make more slabs or whatever. Okay, so that's my workstation tidy. Right, so I'm now ready to cut my pieces out. This Ceramica underglaze transfer, the Skyline I've measured, so the tallest part of the Skyline I have measured as it's 8 centimetres, but I'm allowing 9 so that I've got a little bit of space between the top of the Skyline and the first carved items. I don't really want the first carved item right on the top of this tower. So I'm actually just going to mark on the front here very, very lightly 9 centimetres from the bottom. So I'm measuring up 9 centimetres and just putting a little mark which I can rub out later all the way across, because that's where your transfer is going to be. So I'm just going to join those dots up just with a very, very, very faint impression there. Okay, so I don't want to cut into this bottom part because that's where my stencil's going to be all the way round. Okay, so on this luminaire that I made, I did actually put some carving actually on the shoulder sections, and it works quite well because obviously the light comes out of the sides as well as the front. So I am going to do that again because it worked well last time. Quick swig of fruit tea out of my doodle mug. So cheers everybody. Yum. And we're using the star cutters and the hole cutters. So I'm just going to choose which of my grades of hole cutter I want to use. Do bear in mind that your holes are going to shrink in the biscuit firing and you will lose a little bit of depth or width of your cutouts with the glaze. So don't go too small because nothing's going to shine through that. So I'm just going to hold my section from behind, decide where I want to cut. I'm wiggling my cutter so that it wiggles through. I'm going to push that straight through and out the back because that's going to give me the nicest finish on the top. Not really too worried about the finish underneath because obviously I can't see it. So I'm going to put a star on there. So again, I'm holding it from behind because if I don't, this slab is going to crack. So be careful when you're piercing. I guess there could be something to be said for piercing it before you put the piece together, but to be fair, I have tried it both ways, and I find it's easier to do it when it's at this stage because then obviously you know where your design is going to go, whereas if you do it beforehand, maybe you're not quite so aware of exactly where your design is going to finish up. Okay, so I'm going to use some different sized holes. I think they look more interesting than just using one sized hole. Kind of work out where you want them. I haven't pushed that star cutter all the way through because it was starting to push the clay. So what I will do in a minute is get the scalpel and push it through, cut it out with the scalpel. I can see where it needs cutting, obviously. And then I'm going to do some of these the little holes. And you can decide how you want your piece to look, how many stars you want on it, how many circles you want on it. It's entirely up to you. But I do think that some pattern on the shoulders is quite useful. So I'm just going to carry on doing that on both sides. And I'm pushing out the clay that's getting into the circles cutter with just using a chopstick just to push it out. Just makes it easier to cut it through. Use my scalpel as we did before just to cut through the last little bit that the stamp hasn't cut through. It would cut through if I pushed it hard enough, but I'm worried that it'll crack the slab, so that's why I haven't actually pushed it right the way through. But as I say, I can see where the lines are, so I'm just going to push that out with my scalpel. Okay, so I've done the shoulder sections. I'm just going to run my kidney just over this just to make sure it's still smooth, and I'm pushing the clay back where it has moved slightly by my pushing it through, just to make sure again that section is a nice shape. So I'm always working with that shape. So back to the front. So I've put my line on where my underglaze transfer is going to go, and then I need to decide the design of the cutouts, if you will. I mean, obviously it's pretty random on there, and I prefer things to be slightly more random than contrived. So I'm just going to start putting a design on here, remembering that my skyline goes up and down, so I can come right the way down to this line, but I don't want there to be a line in the actual carving. I don't want there to be a straight line across here. So as you can see, I've kind of undulated that line on there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that section now. Again, I'm going to hold from the back as I'm cutting. So I'm just checking out between adding the stars, whether I've got enough, whether they're in the right places, whether I want more, whether I don't want more. So obviously when the light comes through from behind, you do need to have enough cutouts for the light to come through, but not so many that you're going to lose the feeling of the luminaire. So I'm quite happy that that's enough stars on there before I start putting the circles on. So I'm just going to cut out the stars with the scalpel. All the while I'm just checking my pattern so that I don't get too carried away, using the little cutter to fill in the gaps. Just checking my design as I go along so that I just keep in mind where my end point is. As you start getting more holes, you have to be more careful that you're not going to split your slab. So just make sure that you have your other hand behind, supporting the slab as you're pushing, because there's nothing on the back of here to stop that. And as I say, as it gets more punctures in it, it gets weaker. So I'm just going to check that over, see that I'm absolutely happy with the actual design, cut out the last stars, and we'll see where we are. So having done all my cutouts, I've just turned the piece over and I'm just very carefully pushing back the slab so that it's flat on the front again. Where it has been pushed slightly out of shape, so this is now nice and flat again. Okay, so this needs a little bit of time to set up. I'm just going to check that that base section is square. There's a couple of nubbies on the bottom just to get those off so it stands upright. I'm just going to double check that I'm happy with that, which I am just about. There's always another bit that you can see that needs smoothing. It's a never ending. Right, okay, so I'm generally happy with that. The front section looks okay. We are going to do some scrubbing. I've taken out the line that we put on to show where the transfer was going to go, so I've actually just rubbed that out using the rubber kidney, the line that was across here. I'm just going to make sure that that is okay for as far as I want to take it today. The clay is still quite soft, and obviously it needs to be quite soft for you to carve into it. If you have very, very hard slabs, then you're going to crack it. So do make sure, if your clay has dried out, give it a spray with the spray bottle, leave it for 5 minutes just to soak in, and then start cutting again. But be very careful that you're supporting from the back. So this is where we've got to. Our luminaire now has carving on the front and on the shoulders. I'm just going to leave this now to set up out of the plastic. I want it to dry a bit more before I do the next stage. So I'm going to leave this probably overnight, depending on the temperature where you are. I want it to dry to a point where I can scrubby it, and it's not quite dry enough. And the very last process we're going to be doing is putting the underglaze transfer on. So when everything else on this make is finished, then we'll put the transfer on right at the end. So I've just grabbed myself a quick cup of coffee in the time that I'm waiting for the luminaire to dry a little bit. And I wanted to just share with you, quite often viewers ask me in the comments whether there's any way that they can show their appreciation for a particular tutorial video where I've helped them do something with a tip or a trick. And sometimes these types of tutorial video obviously take quite a long time to do. So actually there is a way that you can help me. I'd like to update my camera equipment and, you know, basically get better at the filming and producing and editing that I do. And to enable me to do that, if you can and if you felt appropriate, there is what's called the Super Thanks button. And I'm just going to show it to you. So on the screen I've picked up one of my videos. As you can see, I've paused it. And on the toolbar underneath where you get to press the like button, there is one that is called, she says, putting her finger on it, thanks, with a little $ in it. And if you press on there, it brings up a screen and asks you what donation you'd like to give. Now, obviously I appreciate that not everybody can or would want to give a donation, but if you have found this video helpful, obviously I'm sharing with you a unique design from my pottery to you, so that you can make it in your own practice. So if you would like to make a donation via Super Thanks, I would be really grateful, and I can put that money towards updating my camera equipment, and obviously it'll give me more time to do more videos. And I know that you're all waiting for the hydrangea head video, so to get me to do that hydrangea head video, a few Super Thanks would be absolutely amazing. So if you could, I'd be very grateful. Right, so we're back with our piece. I'm going to stick my glasses on the head because I shall need those. So I have my box of nylon dish scrubbies. These are just literally scrubbies that you would use on your pots and pans. The more sort of nasty looking they are, the better they work. So I have a pot of those. I have put my Maker's Mark onto the inside of my piece here. If you need to put your maker's mark on, then that's a good time to do it. I have a piece of waffle foam or a piece of foam just to protect my piece so that I'm not bashing it. And the next thing to do is, I'm just moving the transfer out of the way because I don't want to make it dirty, is to give my piece a really good scrubby all over. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of scrubby, and if you've watched my video on how to finish your pieces, this is how I do it. So I am just going to fold the scrubby over itself and just use it like almost like a file on when you file your nails, similar thing. I'm just rubbing it very carefully over the surface of my piece so that all the little bumps and bits that are stuck in the holes or where they shouldn't be come off, and also it will smooth the surface. So I'm just going to take a little while to do that, and also if there are any pieces that are still stuck inside the holes, you might find that there's just a little bit of debris kind of stuck in the holes. Just have a chopstick or something similar just to push those out. So I'm just going to spend a little while doing all the seams on this piece with my scrubby. So things like this, where it's got sort of slightly bashed, will come out with the scrubby if I just run it backwards and forwards over that area. And then I'm going to take it across the base, so each seam line, until I have done all sides and the bottom, everywhere, all the way around. And that will take me about 5 minutes. And on the inside where I have cut out, it's obviously quite rough from where the stamps were pushed through. So I'm just going to scrubby the inside surface just to get those rough bits off. Not worrying too much about what that looks like on the inside, because again, you're not going to be looking at it from that angle. But I do like my pieces to be finished properly, and I'm just going to run the scrubby up onto the shoulder pieces. This clay is still damp, so I'm not having to worry too much about dust. If your piece is drier than mine, so mine is probably still just slightly harder than leather hard, but it's certainly not dry, so I'm not having to worry about the dust. If your piece is drier, please wear a mask. You really do not want to be breathing in dry clay particles. So as I say, if your clay is drier than mine at this stage, please wear a mask if you're using the scrubbies. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that. My next job is to brush off all the little bits, including the bits in the holes. This is important to get them off at this stage. So I'm just trying to get into those cut sections with the brush, get off the dust, because obviously at this stage we can get it off, and we don't want the dust on there when we're using the underglaze transfer. So I'm going to try and get rid of as much of the loose as I can. You can see actually how much scrubbing does. It takes off just a thin layer to give you a nice finish. Right, okay, so I'm happy that that is now clean. I'm just going to pop it out of the way. And very importantly now, because we're about to use the underglaze transfer, I'm going to clean my workstation so that it is dust free and there are no pieces of clay lying on it that I definitely don't want there. Okay, so I've cleaned my workstation. I have my waffle foam, my piece, a ruler, a pair of scissors and the Ceramica Transfer. Now this is very important. Keep this station clean and dry, because if your stencil gets, your underglaze transfer gets wet, it will not do it any favours. So I'm just going to cut the stencil using a pair of scissors Obviously I've got 3 Skylines here, so I'm going to use the London one, and I'm just going to cut that. I don't need this piece at the moment, so I'm going to move it right out of the way so there's no chance of it getting caught with water anywhere. And then on this particular piece, as you can see, there's the registration number and what have you from the printing. So I'm actually going to take that off as well, because I don't want that to transfer onto my piece. So I'm going to cut that too and get rid of that. That is rubbish. Okay, so I'm left with my Skyline. There is obviously a side where the printing is and a side that's the back. And you can tell the difference by the colour. So obviously this side is much blacker than this side, so you can tell which way it goes round. Now on this transfer I've obviously got the London Skyline with Big Ben and the Houses of Parliament and the London Eye. Now I want that part to be prominent on the front of my piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just lay the stencil onto my piece, which is nice and dry and clean, and work out where I want it to be. So if I want to, I can move that across and then join a section onto here so that I can take that across, instead of starting with it at this end, if that makes sense to you. I don't really want this tower at the end. I want it a bit further along so that the London Eye will sort of finish near that end. Okay, so I'm just making sure that I know where it's going to go to. So it's going to go to there, and I'm just going to cut that. I'm going to give it a little bit of extra so that there's a little bit of extra hanging over. You'll see why in a minute. And then I'm going to work out which bits I want to go on the side. So that bit is the front, and then I wrap the image around the side. So again, I'm going to choose which part of this transfer I want to use for that. So I've got another bus here, which I rather like, so I think I'm going to use the bus. So again, I'm just going to mark that there so that I've got enough coming over this edge here. I hope you can see what I'm doing. I'll try and do it upside down. So I'm working out where I want that bus to sit on that line, if you see what I mean. So I'm making sure that I've got enough building here to come over the edge, and then I'm going to cut this again along that same line there. So that's my piece on that side. And then if I flip this over, put the front transfer back on again, marking that, lining that up, I'm going to cut this piece of tissue right up to the actual transfer so that there's no additional tissue on there, like that. Okay, and pop that back on there, and then work out which bit I want to join up. Can you see that there's a house there that I can use that will join up? Okay, so I'm just going to very gently take off that piece of roof that I don't want on there, like so. And then if I put that there like that, that will butt nicely with that piece there. And then I'm going to cut that. You do end up with quite a lot of little bits. I'll cut that one there. So that's going to go next to that top section there. And then I'm going to work out what I want to use out of this on the side. And again, the tree section, there's a tree or a couple of trees on there. So again, I'm going to put that tree section, use some of the trees rather than the houses. And then that piece is going to butt up onto the piece that's underneath it, so I don't actually need to trim that. So that is the other side. Okay, so now we're ready to put our transfer on. I have a little pot of water and a couple of sponges, and if I need to use it, a soft rubber kidney. So the first thing I'm going to do is put this transfer the right way up, so work out which way round you are. So that's my dark side and this is my lighter side, so it goes that way round. I'm going to line up on this bottom edge where I want it to be. So I don't want it right down at the bottom. I'm just going to come up just a little bit from the bottom. So that gives me a sort of a roadway, if you like. And then I'm going to line up this edge here where I want it to be before I commit, and make sure that I'm happy that that is straight on there, okay? And then I'm going to get a sponge and I'm going to try and get as much water out of that sponge as I possibly can at this stage. I do not want a great big wet sponge, I just want it to be damp. And then I'm going to tack this underglaze stencil on, holding it in place and just pressing up and down, not rubbing, pressing up and down all the way along the stencil with an almost dry sponge, just to tack it onto the piece at this stage. I don't want to add too much water. Okay, so I'm just going to tack it on all the way across like so. Then I'm going to use this little piece that we've put for this side on. So I'm going to line that up with the bottom, pop that down there, and again I'm just going to re-wet my sponge but take out as much as I possibly can and tack that piece there. So at this point I am just tacking it on. Okay, that's that piece. Then I'm going to put the side pieces on, remembering which one goes which way. So this piece goes on here, just making sure that my stencil is the right way round. I can see the line, okay, so I'm going to continue the line. I'm going to get my bus where I want it to be. I'm just going to make sure that that's in the right place before I add any water. So I'm pretty happy with that. Hold the stencil, make sure it's straight there, and then I'm just going to tack this piece so that it's on. I'm not worried about this side because of course it's not actually on the piece, it's just the overhang. Okay, that's that. And now I'm going to be careful when I turn this over not to smudge that transfer that I've just put on that side. So carefully turning it over, and then this side I can choose which bit I want to use. So again I'm going to line up the line here as it comes round, and we'll use the trees there, like so. And again I'm just going to tack this down. Right, okay, so I'm just going to pop it back down face front. Just going to trim this piece off. I don't have to worry that this is smudging the transfer underneath because the tissue will save it, but I'll get rid of that bit. Okay, so it's tacked on all the way round. I'm now going to re-wet my sponge, but again, I don't want it sopping wet. If you put too much water on, you will smudge your transfer. So it's better to use less water more times than to put lots of water on And again, I am dabbing this up and down. I am not rubbing it. I am wetting the tissue by going up and down with a not very wet sponge. And again, I'm going to do this side piece. Make sure that all the detail, there's some little birds there. I need to make sure that I've done those and that I've done the edge. As that transfer is there on that section, I might as well use it because it's a waste otherwise, so I might just as well use those bits. And then I'm going to do this side again. You can tell if your transfer has transferred onto the clay. You can almost sort of see that there are no dark black pieces. If you're not at all sure, then use a rubber kidney. I tend not to do this, but you can very, very gently rub a rubber kidney over the surface. Now, the reason I don't usually do this is because I find that if it's going to smudge, this is how you'll smudge it. So as I say, I really am almost putting hardly any pressure on there at all. But if you're not sure that that image has transferred, then you can use a rubber kidney. I'm rubbing it in one direction only, right the way across. As I say, normally I don't do that, but you can do it if you're at all concerned that your image has not completely transferred. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that just for a minute, just to make sure that the whole of that image has transferred. Right, so I've left that just for a minute, just to make sure that that transfer has transferred. And as I was saying, there are no dark sections left showing through on this transfer. So when you come to peeling off, transfers are best if they are peeled back on themselves. So I'm going to do this side section here right in front of the camera so you can see. So I'm going to take the transfer and just roll it back on itself slowly until the tissue comes off. And as you can see, the image is left on the clay, and although the image is on the paper, there is no underglaze remaining on the paper. So all the underglaze has actually transferred. There's nothing left on there. Okay, so once that piece has lost its tissue paper, don't touch it, you smudge it with your fingers, very bad. So yes, keep your fingers off it. That's why we do this part of the make right at the very end when it's ready to go down onto the drying shelf, because I do not want fingers on it. So again, I'll do this side, so I'm just picking up the side of the tissue paper, bending it back on itself, and just very gently pulling that image down. Very satisfying to take the tissue paper off. There we go, and that bit can go in the bin. You can't reuse them, they're single use. And then if I do the little section, I might just lift that up with a knife, because there's a little section there that we put on. So I'll just roll that back on itself there, and then pick up the edge of the big piece. Oh, very satisfying. Here we go. I'll roll it back on itself nice and slowly, and the image is perfect on your piece. Now, don't rub your hand over it. Once it's been bisque fired, don't rub your hand over it, as I did on my New York Skyline, although everybody was very kind and said it looked like New York in the fog, which I thought was quite a good way of putting it. But you can see here that I literally, when I was brushing the piece after it came out of the bisque, I rubbed my hand across the transfer and it literally smudged it. So don't do that. Once you've got your transfer on, your piece is ready to go down and dry, ready for bisque firing. And there you are, one London luminaire. So I hope that you've enjoyed following along with this project. As always, I really love it when you interpret the makes, the tutorial makes that we do on the channel. Do send me a picture, please send me a picture. My website address is in the description below. You can send me a picture via email, and then I can show other people in the wider clay community on the channel your work in the shout outs on the kiln opening videos. So please, if you do this project, send me a picture. I'd really love to see it. It'd be really good to see what your interpretation of the make is. So thank you for watching, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed it. Part 1 and part 2 of the Luminaire tutorial is over. Thanks for watching. See you all on the next one. Bye for now.